start by saying that this is a Strippedown podcast. Strippedown is basically the ideas from the soul. I think people that fear things like AI, I think if you really, really reach deep down into your soul and do things creative and do things because you love doing it because of something you feel like you want to be in touch with, then you shouldn't fear AI, which will basically be a generic form of something that is acceptable among the masses. And I think what we'd like to do is discuss topics that are a little bit out of the normal realm. I think being an artist is to have a rebellious side. I think to try to strive for something different. And I think that's one thing we like to discuss. We had a great conversation that didn't get properly recorded earlier that was talking about social media posts and what makes you comfortable, what makes you uncomfortable. And so my man, the drummer extraordinaire Fred Dinkins, was talking about certain things that he feels uncomfortable of posting because they're too personal. And it's not because of age, it's because he feels that there's certain things that are personal, that you have a personal space that doesn't need to be exposed to the world, which definitely there's a lot of people in the world, they wake up in the morning, they post putting on their slippers, they post walking to the bathroom, they post what kind of toothpaste they're using and how they brush their teeth, and then it just goes on from there for the most mundane things that that most people don't need to know. Oh, look, here's my underwear. Which one should I wear? The one with the cherries on them or the one with the kisses on it? And it's like, that's a major, major decision that you have to spend a lot of time and deep thought on, right? So I think those are the type of things that I don't see Fred doing in the near future. I don't think that has anything to do with age. I think it has to do with you have to be comfortable in your zone. And I think that that's what's, most important. So I think the one you're talking about was, if you're going to have Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, I don't want that out.
Yeah. And I was saying Fred might have someone that loves his drumming so much, and they have to figure out, what is this guy eating? And I need to know more about this guy, not just drums. I don't know, not just what drums you play, what cymbals you like, what sticks you like, where you studied, what your background is. I want to know what he eats. What do you say to that?
In reality, I would probably stay away from that fan.
What if it's many fans?
Well, I don't know if I want to be in that crowd.
They might not give you that choice, unfortunately.
Because if you want to know what I eat and all those types of things, it's like, really? I mean, again, that's one of those things we're talking about now, which I said earlier. My favorite question is when I see what I consider things that are totally, to me, I have no interest in it. My first question is, who cares? Apparently there are some people out there that do care on some of the things you talked about. Like, okay, does he use Crest or Colgate? Some people, they need to get a life. That's all I can tell you, because it's like, hey man, if you're that interested in what I'm doing down to that degree, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know. But we also talked about the insecurity fact about social media. Like if you don't get enough likes, if you do get bad comments, that creates an insecurity for a lot of people. But like you were saying, you have to be secure with yourself first. And that's what's important. You have to like you. You have to love you. And when it comes down to being an artist, it doesn't matter what other people think.
You're absolutely right. But I will say this, that you have somebody that really, really loves the way you play. And they get close to you, they shake your hand, and they smell your breath. And like, what did this guy use to brush his teeth? I want to know, is it Colgate or is it Crest? And you're like, do I reveal that about this, right? And you're like, all right, it's Crest. I knew it. See, my nose instinct. These are the things that I think what happens is, you have a lot of people as they're growing up, especially when they're younger, and they're looking for some kind of guidance, that, they're looking for, for someone like Fred, who's a great mentor, and like, I think there's a lot of people that are misguided, and even little things like that sometimes kind of gives them, it's like mundane in a way. So that's why we, in this sense, we have a shared feeling about this, and we have a little bit of a disagreement, which is, I'm okay if once in a while, I'm not going to like go too personal with a post, but at the same time, people are going to ask some mundane things about you, and sometimes it's kind of interesting little tidbits, nothing too personal. But if they want to know what I brush my teeth with, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked some crazy questions like in clinics. A lot of times when I go to a drum clinic, when the question and answer period starts, I get up and leave. Because, man, do you get some of the craziest questions thrown at you. And a lot of times, I think being a clinician, when those questions happen, you can't answer right away because you're in shock.
So what is one of the craziest questions?
I'm trying to think what.
The first one that pops in your mind.
Like, I think somebody asked me how did I sleep, like what position or something like that.
That's easy. I'm stomach.
And
Lenny?
I'm like,
side. See?
Yeah, I sleep on my side. I sleep on my left side. I mean, there's even things out now about how dangerous it is to sleep on your right side. But I never knew that. I just always wanted to sleep on my left side. That's where I was most comfortable.
But maybe that helped your drumming. Maybe it like balanced it out where like you sleep on your left side, so all of a sudden your right foot.
Since this is my weak side, I guess I help it somehow in my sleep.
Well, you might have enlightened some, curious person at the clinic, that like, wow, you know what? What did you remember most about that clinic with Fred Dinkins? Did you learn about 6/8 drumming or 7/8 or anything odd, or, about keeping very, very steady BPM, staying on the downbeat, knowing, how to, do operations? Nah. You know what? Fred Dinkins sleeps on his left side.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to start sleeping on my left side because, you know what? I think I would be as ambidextrous as him, where I could use all four limbs. Totally, I could do all that. I could play 6/8 with my left hand, and I could play 7/8 with my right hand, and I can do 4/4 with my feet, Yeah. And that's because Fred Dinkins sleeps on his left side, and he uses Crest for his toothpaste. I mean, my God.
Now, that's funny you say that, because years ago, I did a clinic in New Mexico, and God bless this student of mine. I had a drum machine that burnt out. I used it so much. This thing is from I guess maybe the 90s, and it finally burned out. It was called a QY20. Remember, I asked Yamaha, I asked you guys, yeah. So this past week, week before last was my birthday, and one of my students comes up Saturday with this black case. I'm like, is this a microphone or what? And I open it up. It's a QY20, like in a custom-made case with the charger and everything. Now, the reason I bring that up, when I used to do clinics, I would open up with the drum machine playing 4 different time signatures. One was in 6/8, one was in 3/4 or 3/8, and then one was in 4/4, and the other one was in 2. So I had 4 different sounds, and I would play against each one of those. And people would go, how are you hearing that? And I would have to explain it, each subdivision to them and what I was doing. And there was a professor at the clinic known to, like, just interrupt the clinic and try to make the clinician look dumb. And I explained everything to him to where he was like, wow, you really do understand everything you play. I said, of course, I'm playing it. Why should I not? And then he sat down and the place erupted. Like, it scared me because I'm like, what did everybody just jump up and clap for?
Well, I think what they do is, I think it goes back to having a fundamental understanding of everything and having a knowledge and curiosity to, really dig deep into understanding your love of drums. And I think that that's something that's very admirable. That's my viewpoint. I think people relate to that because I think a lot of people want to be that. See the difference, I think, which is like more of like the old school approach to things is really taking the time and aging like wine rather than just trying to rush from point A to point Z without really going through the process from B to Y. So I think that that's really important. I think when people, know that you've taken the time to do everything meticulously over all the years, and it takes so long to craft that, I think people really relate to that very well because I think most people want that. I think most people don't have the patience for it. And especially in this society now with the younger people that want instant gratification, I think it's harder and harder to find people that will just do that over time.
Yeah, it takes discipline. It takes discipline and a lot of focus. And again, to learn all that stuff, the way, I was always seeking that higher level of learning. I always knew there was another level. And there's still other levels that I'm trying to get to at this point in time. But, coming out here, after meeting Harvey Mason and then studying with Marvin Smitty Smith and being able to learn about music from him was like a whole new world. But that set me off really on a whole nother level because I started to study, really wanted to get into harmony and theory more. I went back to school to study harmony and theory. The drumming was drumming, but I was trying to get further to like be able to get inside some of the people's head that played music and I wanted to hear and understand that language, the conversation that was going on between musicians. And that's, the discipline, allowed me to do that from staying in the practice room 8 hours, not coming out but to use the restroom. And Lenny could tell you what my old room used to be like in the garage. And I didn't have an air conditioner back there, and I would be like woozy and have to get up, let oxygen in, let the room cool off, and come back in and shut the door. And people said, man, you crazy for doing that. No, I was trying to get to another level. I was trying to play to a certain place to get work, consistent work, but the artistry is kind of something we were talking about earlier, and the security thing. I mentioned Lady Gaga on Good Morning America, where the commentator told her, like, don't you want to thank your fans for, like, making your music great? And she paused, and she says, well, I need to say that I don't want to offend you. I don't want to offend my fans. I don't want to offend anyone. But in my mother's basement making that music, every song that I ever wrote was great. It was great to me first. And the guy was stunned. He's like, oh, wow. And it took the fans a minute. She says, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but my music is great to me whether I would have never sold one record. I cherish that music the same way. And to me, that's artistry. I remember I had ATTU verse where you could pause. I miss that now, but you could pause and rewind, pause and rewind. Man, my wife got mad. She walked out the room because she said, stop. I kept rewinding it every time she said that. And I was trying to put that into me. And I think that the one thing about, the way you write, you believe in what you write. You believe 100% in what you write. Whether we have to come in and make adjustments, which we do, but it still turns out that, wow, that's Anthony's writing.
Well, thank you. I think, what's interesting is you take three people that is kind of like our basis of Strip Down. If you put Fred in a room, locked away, practicing for hours, you're going to find a lot of drums. You put Lenny away in a room, well, you're not going to find him because he's going to have so much garbage from all of his, technical stuff. But you're going to find a lot of equipment, a lot.
You'll find them just tangled up in a bunch of wires.
Yeah, you might have to use one of those lightsabers to get him out. Or you can always pry him out with, as I saw earlier, I had some Star Wars action figures that I actually ran into. Lenny, oh my God.
He'll come out for that.
That was exciting. So he'll come out, but you'll hear stuff falling all over the place. But, he could lock himself up in a room with a bunch of equipment forever. And then you have, me, which is I could just sit in a stack of, sheet music and just look through all the different songbooks and fake books. And to me, that was I did the same thing. I would lock myself up when I was younger and just go through song after song, progression after progression, and just getting the right voicings, chords, everything. And just, you just want to know more. And I think if you have a true love or true passion for something, I think you're going to want to know more, and you're going to be disciplined enough to take the steps necessary to improve yourself and not try to jump from A to Z too quickly. And I think the process of that slow climb to get from A to B, that's the hardest part, is making that first climb, as we all know. But then once you can get through that, if you play guitar, just learning about where your thumb is supposed to be on the back of the neck, or how your finger position is supposed to be. Or if you're learning piano, doing the scales and knowing your fingers in the right place. If you're on drums, knowing the right form, knowing, how to hold the stick right, just knowing basic things, and perfecting those foundation pieces that are mundane to so many people. But if you truly love doing it, then you're going to still love the process of going from A to B, which I still think is the hardest. Once you're to B, you're kind of on your way, and then it's it gets a little bit progressively easier, but you still need to keep that discipline to get to C, D, and so forth. And I think that's what's required for basically anything. And I think what's the problem is that everybody's trying to just hit a home run without going through the process of learning the right positions. And I always would say this, that form, it doesn't matter if it's in music, it doesn't matter if it's in sports, it doesn't matter if it's in anything, it takes so much time to develop that and to really cultivate, that perfection. And I think people that are really professionals or people that really love doing it will find a way to do it. And it's not a monetary thing. I mean, in our world, we always feel like everything's got to be valued and judged by its monetary content. But I think what you're saying is, if you love something, if that happens, it happens. There's so many different factors that have to kind of fall in place for that to happen, and so much of that is out of our control. But if you keep doing what you love to do, that's always going to keep you on the right path. If you get away from that and you start doing things that you're doing for other people and not for yourself, you're going to lose yourself easy. And I think over time it just gets boring, because then you've lost your foundation, you've lost your root. And that kind of goes against the actual title of what we're doing, which is Strip Down. And I just think that that's something that's, to me, you can't take that away from somebody. You watch the movie The Shawshank Redemption, where it's the lead character gets thrown into the hole for 2 weeks, and everyone's like, oh my God, how do you suffer in there? And he's like, it's up here. He remembered the operas that he was hearing, and they were they couldn't take that away from me. And I think that was one of the basic morals of the movie, which I think is a very important thing about life. And I still think that in the same sense of everybody freaking out about AI and about technology encroaching, I think that it's variable to your own self-security, and I still think it's also variable to your own individual foundation and creativity. If you have that, then it's not going to touch that place. That's one thing that those things can't replicate, which is your innate love for something, and that comes deep, deep inside you. And I really believe that. And so people ask me all the time, I work really hard on something that's non-music. How do you have the time to do something at night when you're so tired and you're working nonstop? You have no rest. You'll go read books. You'll do stuff with your kids. If you love something, you're still going to find something deep into you to be able to push you through and do it. It doesn't matter what it is. And I actually think that that's the best thing that people everybody's looking for something. I still think that, it's something that's good to find what your passions are and understand where your talents are and understand how to like really harness it and make it to your own use. And I think that gets lost because everybody looks at everything so cosmetically these days, thinking that that's what I want. You talk about social media. You see these posts. You see these people that are like on beaches with the perfect bodies, with like, having so much fun, and that's what I want. But like, at the end of the day, is that really going to bring you the true meaning that comes from deep inside? Is it? I don't know. I can't answer that because some people, that's all they want to do with their lives, but in my view, I think there's something more, and it's like through you, it's like you relate through that through drums. I relate through that through playing and writing piano and guitar pieces. Lenny through Star Wars action figures. I don't know.
No,
And
the next
engineering.
gadget, the next recording gadget that's out.
Yes, Best Buy. I mean, you go into Best Buy. I mean, I think that would be the basic, like thing. It's like, you're there. It's like that is temple, for everybody. It's going to be different from person to person. And I just think that that's something that, I think it's don't get off course is what I'd always say to people. And I think that that's a big subject, and I'd say a theme that kind of is going to be reoccurring into a lot of the things that we're talking about. And I just think that, look, what everybody wants is going to be totally different. Here in our group, Fred plays drums. I suck at drums. I mean, I'm not, like, I can play, I guess, but nothing compared to like a master. I don't have the innate love for it. But when it comes to writing songs and figuring out chords and harmonies, I love that. And nothing's going to take that away, and I'm going to work my hardest every single day to try to perfect that. When it comes to engineering technology, I mean, in any aspect, whether it's here in my office, like I'm not very technical in that sense. That's like a different language in its own. I can't sit there and judge like, oh, just because I don't like it, that means it sucks, but like Lenny loves it, right? So,
yeah.
I think that that's something that gets important. So I think like another thing that we would always discuss is trying to take, everybody's born with the first person narrative and trying to get out of that first person narrative. And I think to write is to really understand depth of writing, whether it's in books, movies, songs, and just being creative, is getting out of yourself and trying to put yourself in other people's positions and try to understand it. And it's just, there's so many factors that go into what cultivates somebody, and I think it's very important to understand that. So, like, we have a song that was called Blend Into One, and the idea was I was trying to teach my kids not looking at everything in one angle, trying to find as many different ways that you can interpret something and then create your own conclusion that is balanced, that has foundation to it, that's respectful to people. And I think that that's very important. And I think that that's something that, when we're doing this, when we having these discussions and having this podcast, I think is definitely, I think that's a big part of it. And I think that, one thing I would say is I'm just fortunate to be around people that are very true to themselves. And that's, to me, that's one of the main things I look for when I want to be around people. I don't want to see people that just like sit there and try to impress everybody else or try to throw something. Somebody like, look at this, man. Wow, look at this video. This is the coolest thing. I'm like, if you like it, great. I mean, I'm like, okay, doesn't the next person do the same thing? So maybe I think that's what we were talking about to start the podcast was stay true to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing I notice about art. Like, you take painters.
Which I suck at, by the way. I'm
not
good.
The thing about it, the sad part about it is that most of their fame comes after they're gone.
It's true.
Because most artists, they don't, if you meet a real artist, that's why I don't mind being like I am about social media. They don't run to galleries, some of them, and throw their stuff in there because they look at it. They're trying to look at their art from their own eyes, but also envisioning what other people will see, to wonder if that person that's looking at that painting could see what they see in that painting. And to me, that's music. It's like when I play, when I teach my students about songs, learning songs, I always talk about even today, I got on a couple of students. They played. They didn't know the lyrics. So my thing was, you're just playing a beat. How is that true art? Anybody can learn a pattern. Anybody can learn a pattern, but to play a song, there's a lot of details that go into the song. It's like when we write, first thing I ask you, what are you thinking about, right? I go, when you wrote this, what were you thinking about? You could say, hey man, I saw a pink sky and a red Corvette going down the street. Well, if that's your vision, I got to try to somehow listen to your chord progression, think possibly about a bass line, and then a groove that would simulate a pink sky and a red Corvette. But there's a lot of detail that go into that, like lyrics, harmony, how does that blend, the rhythm, like we talking about today, new song. I want to hear the lyrics so we could rhythmically make them work, like with what we writing, like we've done, and I think that's important. And you talked about AI back in the day. Drum machines was like AI.
I remember I saw that MI with Jeff Beccaro.
Right.
Were asking me that question.
AI was the drum machine to take everybody's place, all the drummers' place. They said humans, from what I understood back in the disco day, you couldn't keep steady disco for 15 minutes. So a drum machine, you just hit a button, you ready to go. But the greats, like Harvey, a few other guys, they were like, okay, I'm going to use this thing to my benefit. And all of a sudden, the drum world start flipping around because you had people that used the machine to make their thing better. And so, that was the one thing. And I think one thing that Jeff talked about was how ironic he named his drum machine Lenny. And he would put a cowbell on, and that was the great Lenny Castro, of course. Yeah. But Lenny was the drum machine. And Jeff said when he would play a fill and he would be off a little bit, he cussed Lenny out. And there was two things behind that. He knew how he made the mistake, but the other thing was also to be in the mindset of, I'm in control of this machine. This machine, I'm not going to be a slave to this machine. And that taught me so much about, like, the mental state of practicing when you're dealing with machines and stuff like that. So I'm now looking at AI the same way. But you've seen these commercials like on YouTube, you turn it on. I don't know anything about music, and listen to what I just dropped today. It's like, well, I hear you, but it's like I kind of cringe because it's like, aren't you interested in what you just played? Like, or you're not interested? I have a program that I can put in input chord progressions, but I'm not just going to put in a chord progression that I don't know. I want to be able to sit down at the piano, and go, okay, do I want to make this a dominant? What do I want to do with this chord? And AI is basically what a lot of people look at as perfection. And if you just use those things, like the computers, you can't come in and change stuff because it's not going to allow you to do it. So your artistry is gone. You've killed it. And that's why, like our thing is raw. We be changing stuff every time we play. We change something.
Well, so I was saying, I remember watching that same video with Jeff Beccaro talking about the drum machine. And one thing he was talking about was nuance. He's like, drum machines will never be nuanced. Mm-mm. You can program it as much as you can, but it doesn't have that human touch. And it's always going to have this little bit of artificialness in it that just doesn't quite resonate the same way as a human touch with a fill, with like the way that, somebody's going to hit the cymbal, somebody's going to have a hi-hat, even little mistakes that are like that just sound great. Yeah. And I think that's the problem is those type of things, and the nuance is starting to get lost. And I think what you're saying, you can learn to play drums in 10 minutes with my video. It's like the instant gratification. And the nuance comes from all the years of curiosity and learning and perfecting everything. And I just think that that's something that's so important. And I think true art, when you look at artists, why it takes so long for certain people to get recognized is because somebody at some point will discover nuance. And there's people that somehow are more sensitive to nuance. And eventually those people will pass it on to other people. Like a good example is, we're talking about art. I love watching a YouTube channel called Great Art Explained. And it talks about so many things. I'm like, wow, I never really thought of looking at that piece of art that way. And he gives the context, the background, so well done. And I keep thinking, each song that we do should be kind of thought in those type of contexts. That there's going to be so many little things musically that are going to be done that is hard for a lot of people to truly understand. But eventually somebody will get it, and somebody will be able to kind of pass it on, and it's kind of like osmosis. Oh, yeah, now I get it. I understand what these people were doing. Or these days, the one thing that I think you want to try to avoid, if you can, as an artist. I'm not talking about as someone that wants to go make money. If that's what you want to do, look, I believe that if you want to be a pop artist in any realm that you want, that's some people are great for that. But you're not pushing anything. I think like human achievement over time is through trying to experiment, trying to think out of the box, and I think trying to avoid the trap of the 1, 2, 3, 4 chord progression with no structural changes in a song, I think is just so important. I can't stress it. It's like, running through the same theme. Every single song, imagine how boring it would be that every single song is basically A, B, C, A, B, and then it has an outro. Every single song has to be that way. That's the only way it's going to be on the radio. It's the only way you're going to get, seeing it on, any, Spotify or on, YouTube or Apple Tunes. It's not going to be boring after a while, the same patterns. I mean, doesn't that make life mundane? Isn't that kind of like, aren't we trying to, achieve a little bit more? Part of like the human experience is taking what you've learned from your mentors and your heroes, making it your own, and trying to figure out ways that you can make it yourself to improve. And then the next person's going to learn from that as well. So you're passing along that knowledge. But imagine, like, would you ever, just even 100, 200 years ago, you live up in an island chain somewhere, or you live in the middle of the mountains, you don't have access to those people. How do you improve on that? You might be a lost talent for the ages. You could just be buried in a vault like a mummy somewhere. And I just think that that's what's so important, to stay true to yourself, stay nuanced, stay curious. And I think try to think out of the box a little bit. And I think to be able for someone like us that have been around now we're no spring chickens anymore, to kind of relate that to some of the younger people that, they can achieve a lot. And I just think a lot of that is hard work and not trying to, like you said, stay in discipline. And I think that's something that's very important.
Well, I mean, if you look at the word and the meaning of what jazz was and still is in a lot of cases, you would go see a band that's at a club for a week, and you would see them one night, and then the next night they play the same songs, but they don't sound the same.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of artistry. And those guys were so gifted that no matter how they played the song, you recognize the melody, but you would be freaked out, the musicianship behind what just happened. You'd be blown away. I remember going to see Max Roach. First time seeing Max Roach. He was at the Jazz Bakery, I believe, for 3 nights or something. And I believe I went like every night or something. And I was just freaked out. Like, he never played the same. And that's the thing about, I often hear about Herbie Hancock. Herbie learned it from Miles. That Herbie would never play the same song the same way. He doesn't like to rehearse. I've heard that from several people. He does not like to rehearse. It's like, no, let's just go play. And I don't know how true it is, but I heard a rumor that when Miles Davis was playing, the Coltrane was in the band. Coltrane was in the hotel room practicing. You know, Miles walks by, he hears Coltrane, you know, rehearsing for the show. And they get on the bandstand. Miles says, hey, you know that stuff I heard you playing in the room? I don't want to hear none of it tonight. So now that puts him in a bag to say, oh, shoot, I got to play something fresh. And that's the thing about, like, writing. You want to stay fresh. You want to stay, because if I use the word current, that's the wrong word for today, because it's really bad. I mean, like we were talking about, like, you know, all the talent and the bands that Motown put out, there was other record companies put out a somewhat similar band.
Yeah.
But they wasn't the same thing. That's been going on for years. It's like, you know, even in jazz, they would take the chord progressions and write a new melody on top, because chord progressions are not patent. You can't. They're not protected, because anybody could come up with a, you know, a chord progression or whatever. And you know, that's basically, I think everybody should really explore the history of music. It's important to know who did what, why music is the way it is today, where all this stuff comes from. Like why do you need to be different? Why would you want to be different? That's because everybody has, you know, I tell each student, your DNA is different than mine. You'll never play Billie Jean like I play Billie Jean. And guess what? I'll never play Billie Jean like you play Billie Jean. I can't. It's impossible. So if you love what you do and you're into, like, I'm not telling you to be arrogant and cocky. I don't like that at all. People say I'm not shy. I'm still shy. I'm very shy. I'm shy doing this thing right now. I'm just, you know, I'm not really like out there like putting myself out on YouTube, and you know, that's why you don't see posts from me every day. Probably maybe once a year, if that. But it's important to know history, though. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, you know, whatever instrument you play, learn who did the most amazing things on that instrument, and then try to copy, imitate as many people as you can, and then find your own lane. Find out what it is you do, and then learn to appreciate that and love what that is.
I think you're right. I think, you know, I think one thing you want to do is, I think it's interesting when you're talking about the Coltrane, Miles Davis thing, because I always think the same thing, that, you know, you get yourself prepared by taking in every single influence you have, practicing to the point where it's like you want to basically, what I think Miles was saying, through like, almost through improv or improvisation, that you can really come up with ideas that are out of the normal realm, that don't sound so generic, that don't sound so, like, they're much more organic when they just kind of flow out of you. And I think that that's basically his point. Whereas if you start overthinking things, then all of a sudden it's like a shooter in basketball. You start overthinking the shot, you're going to miss it.
Yeah.
And you just let the game come to you, just let the shot go, and just trust your form and trust everything and trust yourself. The shot goes in. And I think the same thing when you're playing music. I mean, look, I remember the first time, you know, Fred, you were around, I was nervous, you know, like, God, I got to step up my game and be ready. And I just remember the one thing I can at least fall back on is spending all the time, you know, in the practice rooms and practicing and doing the scales and just studying every single person that I love, just to try to be able to hold my ground. Where the, you know, you saying, this guy, he holds his own. I respect you for that. And I think that that's what's so important. And I just think that that's, you know, one thing we I think we discuss quite a bit. And I think that's, I think it's always important to remember, that stay true to yourself, like we were talking about before. So I think, we have some very exciting stuff coming ahead. Lots of very thought-provocative titles of songs, lots of different combinations of songs and people. And among that, great people, great musicians, great artists, and hopefully some kids that will be listening. Have a good night. Thanks, Fred, again. Yes, you could also catch us at www.strippedown.band.com. And I stress that band.